In astrology, the sun occupies a unique and foundational role. It is not merely one celestial body among many. It is the organizing principle of the entire chart. Astronomically, the sun is the gravitational center of the solar system. Astrologically, it symbolizes the gravitational center of the psyche, what Carl Jung might describe as the ego-self-axis or the individuating principle. This script will explore the sun not as it manifests in specific signs, houses, or aspects, but as an archetype unto itself. Our focus is not on superficial identity or mass-market symbolism. We are concerned with the sun as a psychological and ontological construct, a representation of self-consciousness, volition, directionality, creative potential, and the lifelong task of self-actualization. We will approach the sun as a developmental imperative, not something one simply has, but something one must become. Defining the sun in astrological theory. The sun is traditionally classified as a luminary, alongside the moon, but its role exceeds that of mere illumination. It functions symbolically as the sovereign principle of identity. It denotes the emergence and consolidation of selfhood through conscious awareness and volitional action. In natal astrology, the sun is understood to represent the core of the personality, the unified sense of I that persists over time. Conscious will, the ability to act with intention based on one's internal sense of identity. Vitality and life force, not only physical vigor but the psychological drive to be. Creative agency, the urge to generate meaning, form, and contribution from within. The process of individuation, the unfolding journey of becoming who one inherently is. Astrologically, the sun correlates with solar deities across cultures, figures such as Apollo, Ra, and Surya, all of whom symbolize not merely brilliance but order, clarity, and intelligibility. These are not arbitrary associations. They reflect cross-cultural recognition of the sun's function as a governing and cohering force. The sun as symbolic center, a systemic perspective. The natal chart can be understood as a dynamic symbolic system, and within that system, the sun operates as the principle of integration and orientation. Just as the Earth orbits the sun in the chart is what other planetary functions must eventually serve and integrate with for psychological coherence. In this sense, the sun is not the totality of the self, but the center around which the self is organized. This structural centrality is critical. Without a functioning sun, the chart becomes disjointed, an assortment of instincts, drives, and potentials lacking direction. The sun provides cohesion. It is the reference point for all conscious integration of experience. The sun and the formation of identity. Psychologically, the sun corresponds with the emergence of identity in early development, what developmental psychologists describe as ego formation. This is the process by which a child differentiates themselves from their environment and begins to form a consistent narrative of selfhood. The sun, then, symbolizes not the socially constructed persona, a function more closely associated with the ascendant, but the internalized center of agency and self-perception. It reflects how the individual comes to recognize themselves as a singular, self-aware subject. This sense of self is both constant and developmental. The sun signifies not only the raw potential for identity but the process through which identity is constructed, challenged, and refined. To grow into one's sun is to cultivate a stable and authentic sense of self through experience, reflection, and conscious choice. The sun and conscious will. Volition is central to the sun's function. Unlike the instinctual responses associated with the moon or the relational dynamics of Venus, the sun is associated with intentionality. It is concerned with what one chooses to become, given awareness of one's own existence. Will, in this context, does not mean coercive control over circumstance. Rather, it means directionality, the ability to choose actions that align with one's internal sense of purpose or integrity. Astrologically, a weak or conflicted sun may manifest as a diffused sense of identity, lack of direction, or passive responsiveness to external influences. Conversely, an integrated and well-expressed sun reflects decisiveness, clarity of self-concept, and psychological sovereignty. The sun and the teleological self. One of the most profound aspects of the sun is its teleological symbolism, that is, its representation of the self as a project or trajectory. The sun does not describe the individual as they are, but as they are becoming. In this light, the sun functions as a symbolic hypothesis, the person you are meant to become through a process of conscious development. It does not represent an innate, fixed identity but a goal state, an ideal of selfhood toward which one is oriented. This places the sun at the center of the astrological chart as a principle of potential, rather than mere personality. The sun represents the conscious task of articulating and actualizing one's identity in the world, not simply having an identity in some essentialized or predetermined form. The sun and creativity as self-expression. In astrological theory, the sun is often described as the seat of creativity. Importantly, this does not mean artistic talent in a narrow sense, but the broader ability to create meaning, purpose, and self-definition through one's actions. Creativity here is defined as the expression of inner order. That which is authentic, generative, and rooted in the individual's sense of self is an expression of solar energy. This creative force is not reactive, it is proactive, constructive, and individuating. The solar function demands that the individual translate subjective experience into objective form, whether that form is intellectual, interpersonal, artistic, or vocational. Creativity, then, is the process through which the individual externalizes their internal coherence and contributes something uniquely theirs to the world. The sun and vitality. Biological and psychological dimensions. Traditionally, the sun has been linked to vitality and life force. In medical astrology, it governs the heart and circulation, the systems that distribute energy throughout the organism. In psychological terms, this symbolic role translates to the capacity for sustained agency. A well-integrated sun is often associated with vigor, motivation, and consistency. A poorly integrated sun, by contrast, may correlate with fatigue, aimlessness, or a fragmented sense of identity. This is not to be understood in deterministic or causal terms, but symbolically. The more one lives in accordance with their solar imperative, the more energized and centered they are likely to feel. Solar health is not reducible to physical wellness. It reflects existential alignment. The sun's developmental arc across the lifespan. Because the sun represents a developmental process, its full expression typically unfolds over the course of a lifetime. Early life is often marked by dependence on external validation or inherited identity structures, such as family roles, cultural norms. The maturation of the sun involves a gradual shift toward self-definition and inner authority. We can delineate this process into rough phases. Initial phase, childhood. The sun is experienced passively, often through parental figures, particularly the father or the dominant role model. Formative phase, adolescence. The individual begins to question inherited identities and experiment with self-definition. Integrative phase, adulthood. The individual increasingly acts from a self-determined sense of identity, values, and direction. Transcendent phase, later life. The individual embodies their sun more effortlessly, often becoming a source of clarity and coherence for others. This trajectory emphasizes that the sun's meaning cannot be reduced to a static personality description. It must be understood dynamically, as a process of inner consolidation and outward expression. Pathologies of the sun. Excess and deficiency. As with any archetype, the sun has pathological forms when unbalanced. Two primary distortions of the solar function are solar deficiency, characterized by a lack of coherent identity, diminished willpower, low vitality, and a passive or dependent orientation. Individuals may feel invisible, insignificant, or uncertain of their purpose. Solar excess, characterized by narcissism, authoritarianism, rigidity, and inflated self-importance. The Sun is over-identified with the ego and demands dominance or admiration. Both distortions reflect a misalignment between the symbolic task of the Sun and the individual's actual development. The aim is not to suppress or inflate the solar function but to bring it into alignment with one's authentic values and experience. The Sun as existential anchor. Ultimately, the Sun is the anchor of selfhood. It is the part of the psyche that seeks continuity across time, coherence across contradiction, and meaning across experience. To live from the Sun is to act from a place of integrated agency. It is to have a center, not one that negates complexity, but one that orients it. The Sun does not eliminate doubt, but it provides a locus from which doubt can be engaged constructively. It does not solve life, but it makes life livable by giving it form and focus. In existential terms, the Sun represents commitment, the decision to live as oneself, to express one's truth, and to pursue one's own development regardless of external approval or outcome. The Sun is not a static attribute, it is a dynamic imperative. It calls each individual not to conformity or comfort, but to the difficult, ongoing task of becoming fully and consciously oneself. In this way, the Sun is not simply a planet. It is a principle, a function, a developmental process. It is not the sum of one's behaviors or preferences but the axis around which one's entire identity is organized and matured. To study the Sun is not to predict behavior or describe personality. It is to ask, what is the coherent core of this life? What direction is this person growing toward? What must they become in order to be fully themselves? The chart begins and ends with the Sun, not as a surface label, but as an inner reality.